Folks, a very good morning to you and welcome to our webinar on Ticking Time Bomb or Industry Hype. The subject this morning, the end of Microsoft Windows XP. So we're going to spend the next 30 to 40 minutes looking at some of the challenges associated with migrating away from Microsoft Windows XP and looking at some of the potential solutions as well that you may be able to use to make your journey away from XP that little bit easier. My name is Deirdre Cash and I'm the Marketing Manager here in MJ Flood Technology. I noticed there's quite a few of you on the call this morning that may not be very familiar with us as an organisation, so I thought I might take just 5 minutes out of the agenda time this morning to give you a whistle-stop tour of who we are and what we're about. The company was founded in 1936, so we've been around for a long time, and I suppose people don't realise that the long track record we have in business. Started with very humble beginnings as a typewriter repair business in Pearse Street in Dublin, and the technology wing, as you can see there, was founded in 1982. So we've seen our share of ups and downs, recessions, depressions, booms and busts. And I suppose the secret to our longevity and our success in business over the years is our ability to reinvent ourselves. So we've diversified into a number of different business areas covering technology. Print services, we're the exclusive distributor for Connacht Minolta here in Ireland. We've a large scale furniture division. We do interior contracting. And we also do stationery and digital signage. For example, we provide all the kiosks to IKEA in the UK, do a lot of work with AIB here locally as well. Financial stability is a big issue for us, as it is for you, I'm sure, in terms of your preferred supplier listings and who you choose to do business with. Our own, I suppose, stability is there for you to see. We did turnover 34 million last year, net profit of 2.4 million. And I suppose at a time when a lot of businesses are struggling to survive in the current climate, we were able to increase our revenue by 30% year on year over 2010. 2012 figures haven't been officially audited yet, but there is certainly a very similar strong performance in terms of our success there. We've good geographic spread in Ireland. We've 7 regional offices in I suppose most of the urban centres: Dublin, Cork, Limerick, Athlone, Sligo. And we also have a UK presence in Scotland, stretching right down to the UK as well. So we like to think we've most business areas covered. Our ethos is very much one of trying to help customers align business and IT. Okay, so every other vendor says that as well, but we generally, that does underpin our approach in terms of how we look to work with accounts. First and foremost, we try to help customers to protect and maximise the existing IT investment that they have. I suppose technology life cycles are getting ever shorter, and that's putting increasing pressure on budgets, and we do recognise that. We don't help customers to deploy technology for technology's sake. We do try and take a consultative approach in terms of looking at your overall business, looking at your operations, how your processes are structured, and really using technology to try and drive business change, drive things like productivity, enhanced customer service, and that of course adds to bottom line. Value for money is something that's very pertinent at the moment, and certainly that's something we're very conscious of when we look to work with customers. And I suppose our approach as well is to try and build long-term relationships with you, to understand your business, understand your model, your operating environment, your market pressures, and really get a holistic view of how technology can help to address some of the challenges you face day to day. We like to think of ourselves as an innovative leader. For example, we launched last year, first to market here in Ireland, our managed device service, which has proved very, very popular, particularly amongst larger organisations looking to deploy mobile devices amongst large teams of customers, and that's been very successful for us. We offer a full gamut of services in terms of IT and voice infrastructure. I'm not going to list them out there. Very strong Microsoft house, and obviously a lot of the content is based on Microsoft today. We're finding that mobility is very much driving the adoption towards cloud, and increasingly we're finding ourselves having those types of mobile and mobile strategy conversations with organizations at a very high level, because it is driving IT and the way they're looking to do business. We do have a network operations centre based here in Baldonnel in Dublin, and from this centre, which is has a full suite of qualified engineering staff, we provide a full line of core managed IT services. So everything from mobile device management as a service to IT security as a service to backup and disaster recovery as a service. We offer the full suite, and customers can obviously choose to just take the core service or optional add-ons. These are just some of the partners that we work with on a day-to-day basis, and obviously we put a huge emphasis on keeping our staff constantly trained and up to speed on technology and developments, because the world is changing at a very rapid pace. I draw your attention in particular to some of those accreditations around Microsoft Gold partnership, our HP Gold partnership, and our partnership with CA on the backup and business continuity side of things. We're the only platinum partner here in Ireland for CA technologies, and that's something we're quite proud about. So I'm going to hand over now to Liam Lynch. And just while we do that, I would encourage you to engage with us on social, through our social networking channels. We're quite active on LinkedIn, on Twitter in particular. I'm personally not a great fan of Facebook. And in fact, the webinar from today will be recorded and put up on our YouTube channel. So if you do want to share the contents with any colleagues internally, I will be sending you out a link in due course, and you can circulate that amongst the rest of your team members. So I'm going to change over to Liam now. I would point out to you that you can use the questions tab on your control panel there, and I'd encourage you that if you do have any questions, jot them down in there into the question section as we go along, and we can address those questions then at the end of the webinar. So Liam Lynch is a senior infrastructure architect here in MJ Flood Technology. He's a specialist in desktop migration and has huge experience, particularly in Australia, in deploying very large-scale desktop migration projects. So he's going to share his experiences with you now in terms of how you might go about migrating away from Microsoft XP.
Okay, my screen. Good afternoon, guys. I'm just sharing my screen with you now. So hopefully everyone can see that. As Deirdre just said, I have a lot of experience with desktop migrations, specifically with performing them with the aid of System Center Configuration Manager, 2007 and now 2012. Prior to that, I had worked with SMS 2003 and going back to SMS 2.0. I've been involved with a lot of migrations, both big and small, and I've learned a few lessons along the way. And today I'm briefly going to share some of the lessons I've learned and highlight some of the capabilities of System Center Configuration Manager to try and show you guys how it could help you in your migration efforts, whether it's currently in progress or something you're in the planning phase of. So the end of Windows XP is coming up, and some people out there might be considering not migrating. And a few of the risks with that, well, one, support isn't ending. You can still purchase custom support, but the pricing for that hasn't been released yet, but Gartner have suggested $200,000 for enterprises with software assurance, 500,000 that don't. Another concern is software vendors are now actively dropping support for Windows XP in advance of the April 2014 deadline. Microsoft themselves with Office 2013, you cannot install it on XP workstations. The latest version of the Adobe Creative Suite, they are autos and there will be more to come. Similar issues are coming up in the hardware front. They are products, printers and faxes and things being released to market now that don't support XP. I've had to do some tweaking of INF files of some device drivers to get printers working for clients on the existing Windows XP fleet. So it's on its way out, and for those who have not looked at migrating the workstation environment over, they now need to really start paying attention. Now, I have learned a few lessons, and a couple of the mistakes that I often encounter is, one, not adhering to an application-orientated migration approach. That phrase will start to make a little more sense to you as I work through this presentation. So traditionally what a lot of enterprises do is they might focus on deploying the operating system, and they tackle things such as getting the workstation hardware updated, obtaining device drivers for desktops, laptops and printers and so forth, development of the reference images, development of the GPOs. And all of these things are well and good. They need to be done. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that they fail to really give their applications the attention they desire and they require. The applications become an afterthought really, and often desktop support might find themselves pushing out the new reference images and then trying to track down installation sources for line of business applications and trying to determine how do I install this again, how do I license this, and it can be a bit of a pain. So your applications, they are your users, they're central to everything they do. They don't know what a GPO is, they don't care. They just care about the shortcuts they launch when they come to work in the morning and the dialogues that they see popping up on their screen after they launch those shortcuts. Without an understanding of your applications, your infrastructure design decisions in regards to migration may not actually reflect your requirements. A case that I encountered was a large enterprise were purchasing Citrix VDI solution, server hardware, and actively recruiting for a VDI specialist. And the rationale behind that project was to mitigate for application compatibility issues. They wanted to produce a legacy Windows XP environment within VDI, but they hadn't actually assessed their application compatibility. So it wasn't known at that point in time whether they need it. Another consequence is you do find yourself, if you don't pay attention to applications, in that break and fix scenario, and users are disrupted. Now the next common mistake we encounter is a failure to automate. The arms and legs approach, it's okay for the small business, but it's not really workable in the large enterprise, particularly when time constraints apply. And if you have a large migration that needs to happen between now and April, you do have time constraints pressing against you. Now in the larger organizations, there often is automation. Perhaps they have reference images and they're pushing them out. There may be some software deployment happening, but they often miss opportunities to automate processes which could be automated but aren't. So what we would recommend is you adopt an application-orientated migration approach, and you obtain a high level of automation through System Center 2012 Configuration Manager, or SCCM. So what is an application-orientated approach? Well, it's a phased approach consisting of an identify phase, a rationalize phase, an assess compatibility phase, a planning and design phase, an implement phase, and then your migration. So the identify phase. So the goal of this phase is to perform a discovery of your workstation environment. And what you want to determine is what individual workstations do not meet the minimum requirements of your target operating system, be it Windows 7 or Windows 8. And you want to get a complete listing of what software is installed within your environment. IT often don't realize what applications are out there and in use, particularly where users have the ability to install software themselves. SCCM plays a key role here because of its software inventory feature, its hardware inventory feature, and its reporting, which has over 400 predefined reports. There's a screen clipping there of some of them. If you get an SCCM primary site up and running and the client on your workstations, in a matter of days you will have a pretty thorough software and hardware inventory of your environment. The next step would be the rationalize phase. And what you're looking to do here is take that listing of applications and start crossing off the ones you don't need. And the reason is this will reduce the cost and effort for your migration. Now, Gartner have placed the cost for migrating each individual application at between $4,500 and $5,000. Now, that might seem like a lot, but you might have to purchase software upgrade licenses. You might have desktop support running around installing software on individual workstations. You might have to get in specialists to help you upgrade the application because there may be a backend that has to be touched as well. So that's not an unreasonable costing and would be in line with my own experience. And that cost doesn't include the ongoing maintenance and support. Unfortunately, the cost with managing and maintaining software doesn't end when you deploy your workstations and deploy the software. It keeps coming back. Now, there is no means by which this can be automated. It really only can be done through human effort, but it's an activity which is often bypassed in migration efforts and something that really pays for itself and then some. And some guidelines that I would suggest are consolidate software applications with duplicate functionality. You don't need Win7 zip and WinRAR. Pick one, make that your standard, deploy it. Consolidate multiple application versions. Don't have multiple versions of the one product where possible. Retire applications with duplicate Windows operating system functionality. For example, Snagit. The snipping tool introduced with Windows 7 will replace Snagit. Retire that application. And then engage with your organization. Try to verify what applications are actually in use and are mapped to a legitimate business process. You'd be surprised the amount of times the business will come back and say, we don't use that anymore. The next phase is assess compatibility. Now, hardware compatibility can be determined with the click of a mouse thanks to SCCM reporting. You literally go reports, upgrade assessment, hardware device status summary. I've got that report highlighted in the screen clipping. Run that and you'll know if your hardware fleet meets the minimum requirements for Windows 8, Windows 7, 32-bit, 64-bit, whatever your desired target platform is. Now, when it comes to software compatibility, and this can be a scary concern for a lot of IT decision makers out there, what you can do is install the Application Compatibility Toolkit and integrate it with SCCM with the use of the Upgrade Assessment Toolkit, which effectively combines the two, and I've supplied a screen clipping. And what the ACT can do is compare your software inventory stored within the SCCM database against the Windows Application Compatibility listing online. And for commercial off-the-shelf products, that will give you a state of the nation for your applications within your environment. Now, for the bespoke applications and the unknowns, you can create an ACT collector and deploy that to workstations, and it will analyze DLL calls and things like that over a period of time and send back XML data, and you will be able to generate reports for those bespoke applications to help close out the ones that aren't defined in the Windows Application Compatibility listing. It can also be used for Internet Explorer compatibility testing. And the desired output for this phase is you want to have a red, yellow and a green against your rationalized application list. Red might be no upgrade available, product has been discontinued. Yellow might be something like free upgrade available or known fix or tweak to make it work. And green is it's okay to proceed, migrate. So now we'll get into the planning and design. And it's typically in an IT infrastructure project, you start with planning and then you design and you go into implement, deployment, and then you've management and maintenance. Well, a desktop infrastructure migration is a little different. You really should not be going into planning and design until you have assessed the compatibility of your application portfolio. That is something that I would really like to emphasize. You see, I come across enterprises looking at VDI infrastructure, buying third-party product solutions to solve application compatibility issues they don't have. And when they get into the assessment, they realize they spent a lot of money that they didn't need to spend. Now, when you know about your application compatibility, you can then start mitigating for the compatibility. And there are technology solutions, I've listed some there, we won't have time to cover them all today, which can get you out of jail. These products, and I would suggest those of you who aren't familiar with Browsium, do a Google. That's great for resolving the Internet Explorer compatibility issues. Really, really great product. Implement. Right, so the next phase, you've done your planning and design, you've picked your technology solutions, which will be SCCM and perhaps some others such as Medfi, Browsium, and now you're ready to deploy. So this will involve installation of secondary sites into branch or remote offices if they require them, the installation of some optional SCCM roles and features which might not have been required up until now, but you probably will want to get them up and running as part of your implementation. Maybe there'll be some other features of SCCM or its complementary products you'll be looking at, such as forefront endpoint protection, application virtualization with AppV or MedV, maybe VDI, whatever. Every migration is unique and they tend to have a mix of technology solutions, and you really have to cater your planning and design when I'm engaged for whatever project and whatever the application compatibility state is within that environment, and budgets and other things play a part. You can now do the typical actions such as configure your group policies, develop your reference images or your task sequences within SCCM. I'd also recommend you populate the SCCM hardware driver library. For those of you who are using a solution such as Semantic Ghost, I would imagine managing and maintaining all of those reference images can be a bit of a pain, and if there's an update to a device driver, you either don't install it, or if you do install it, you have to update multiple references and images. And it tends to be a bit of a pain point for desktop support and whoever has to look after the references and images. One of the great features of SCCM is the ability to add drivers to the library and have SCCM take care of the deployment for you during the OSD process. You should also be looking, as part of the implementation phase, to be populating your SCCM software library with applications, software updates, and your operating system image, or your Win image files as such. There's a screen clipping of the start of what I would call a software library. I would suggest you should go well beyond having Adobe Reader, Flash, and a few of the applications shown there. You should try to get as many applications as possible into your software library during the implementation phase, because the more apps you get in during the implementation phase, the easier the migration will become for you. Now, the implementation phase will obviously involve the configuration of System Center OSD. And what I would recommend is you configure 3 task sequences a standard deployment that will push out Windows 7, for example, with your core application set, and join it to the domain, and that's it. So it's a standard installation. The next task sequence would be an in-place upgrade. The third task sequence would be a side-by-side deployment. And task sequence 2 and 3 would basically be a duplicate of task sequence 1 with the addition of some user state migration actions. And this will automate the backup via an SCCM state migration point. What an SCCM state migration point? It's effectively a shared folder on the SCCM server which the client can upload data to before the installation of Windows 7, and post-installation of Windows 7 pull the data back down. If there's a concern in regards to space on your server infrastructure or your storage area networks, you can also configure the user state migration to store that data locally on the workstation using a technique known as hard linking. So what does it back up? Well, it'll back up my documents, my video, my music, my pictures, so on and so forth. It will also scan the local hard disk drives for those file extensions shown there. If you have a document on the root of your C drive and it's called my important business.doc, it will place it back in the root of the C drive. Wherever the user places those files, it will put them back in the corresponding location on the Windows 7 or Windows 8 workstation. So it doesn't just restore data, it puts it back where the users expect to find that. And if there's any additional file types, it can, with a few clicks of the mouse, you can append additional file types to that listing. That's just the default listing. We can add extra. So in my experience, there should be zero data loss, and the backup and recovery process should be fully automated. A Fortune 500 company I dealt with before, with branch offices pretty much in every EU country and the Far East, were going to fly an engineer to each of those offices to run the backup my files and settings wizard, which is shipped with Windows, to back up data to an external hard drive and post-installation restore data. They had SCCM, they had secondary sites in every single office. They just did not realize they could automate that process. It was a no-brainer. They automated and they saved themselves a lot of money because they did not need to fly that engineer halfway around the world and then some. Now, during the implementation phase, you will be configuring some application compatibility fixes. And I've mentioned before, it's probably a concern for some of the people in this call. Whatever the issues are, there are fixes. ACT shims are sort of tweaks for applications which can solve issues such as GINA DLL calls, which is a DLL included with Windows XP but not with Windows 7 or Windows 8. Some enterprises look at putting in virtual desktop infrastructure just to host some legacy applications. There's Internet Explorer compatibility fixes. Now there is the Internet Explorer compatibility mode, which does resolve a lot of the issues with a click of the mouse. And there's that product I mentioned previously, Browsium, which is it's a great product. It's not a Microsoft product. What it does is it adds additional rendering engines to a Windows workstation. So if I had Windows 8 with Internet Explorer 10, it will add IE9, IE8, an IE7, and an IE6 rendering engine. And an IT administrator can use group policy to mark individual URLs as running against individual rendering engines. So I can have a URL running against the IE6 rendering engine, and if a user browses to that site, it will open a new tab within the same Internet Explorer window and run that tab using the legacy Internet Explorer rendering engine. Really powerful, really quick and easy to get up and running. You can deploy the client with SCCM and configure your policies through group policy. A really great product. For those of you with concerns about Internet Explorer, I'd suggest you check that one out. Now, at this point, now you're ready to migrate, and you should actually be well positioned for a successful migration. The more content you add to the software library during the implementation phase, the less effort you'll actually have during this phase. And it really can, in addition, that reduction in administrator effort really will accelerate your migration. If you're going with the arms and legs approach, sure, you could hire some additional contractors and they could run around your environment, swapping in and out workstations, kicking off installations, installing software from your software file share. But that'll take time and effort. And if you want to get your migration completed promptly, then you need automation. You can also, with SCCM, achieve a zero-touch deployment. There should be no need for desk site visits, with the exception of if you're retrofitting hardware and perhaps adding additional RAM or something to that effect. You can kick off an installation remotely for any individual workstation you decide. And in fact, users can be empowered and they can kick off the migration at a time that suits themselves. You can set up a task sequence to run not at a scheduled time, but through user initiation. And the user can launch that upgrade at a time that suits themselves. I've shown there a screen clipping of the Software Center, which is a feature of the SCCM 2012 client, where you can make applications available for users to install themselves. You can also make operating system deployment task sequences available. So a user could kick that off, head for lunch and come back, and they should see Windows 7 staring them back in the face. Now, post-migration, SCCM is a really useful and excellent product if you're going about a desktop migration. But it's also an excellent product post-migration and will be a great benefit to IT operations. OSD task sequences can continue to be used long after the migration has completed. If you're refreshing maybe 20% of your hardware fleet every year, excellent. You have OSD task sequences there to do side-by-side migrations to move data from the old machine onto the new. Application delivery. Not all applications will be pre-installed. Users might ring the help desk and request something like Microsoft Project. The help desk, with the click of a mouse, can deploy Microsoft Project onto that user's computer. You can also make software optional for users to install themselves through the Software Center. That's very useful for applications which do not have a license cost associated with them. Perhaps an iTunes, a Firefox, if you wanted to make something like that available to users. And for those type of applications which regularly get upgraded, and the two I've just listed do tend to get regular version updates, it's a click of the mouse for an IT administrator to drop in the new version and update the content at the server side, and a dialog will appear in the bottom right hand corner of the user's desktop to let them know new software available or new update available, and they can run it at whatever time suits themselves if they wish to. Application virtualization, AppV, is absolutely and completely integrated now with SCCM. It has been since 2007, the R2 release. It literally takes a few clicks of the mouse to turn your SCCM server infrastructure into an application virtualization environment. The software updates feature of SCCM, really useful. There's a very useful feature known as maintenance windows, where which is particularly useful if you're patching servers, where you can configure a maintenance window for a group of workstations or servers or all systems, and updates can be configured not to install any time outside of that maintenance window. So you might set up a maintenance window for 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning for your server environment, and at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, updates will install if required on your servers, and it'll do a reboot. So it is a really useful feature. The power management and wake and LAN is a feature of SCCM, has been since 2012. We've discussed already the software and hardware inventory, very powerful. Asset intelligence, useful with software license reconciliation. Mobile device management, SCCM can be used to manage mobile devices. It has a connector for Exchange, so you can configure your Exchange active sync policies through the SCCM console. It also, since the release of Service Pack 1 recently, now includes support for Mac and a variety of Linux operating systems. It does not support OSD type functionality, but it does support application deployment and software update or patching for those workstations. Really useful now that they've introduced this. It's closing out one of the limitations that enterprises and organizations used to find with SCCM. I've had customers say, sorry, we're not going to look at SCCM because it won't manage our Macs, and we have a lot of Macs. Now, I don't know, I'm guessing some of you guys likely submitted some questions. So what I might do is review those now and respond to whatever's come true.
Yes, Liam, actually we have a question here from one of our attendees, and he's asking, what's the minimum PC hardware spec for a Windows 7 upgrade? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Well, it depends on whether you're going 32-bit or 64-bit, and no, I'm afraid off the top of my head I don't know right now.
Okay.
Every project I've been involved in, it's something I have to find out at the beginning of the project, and I tend to forget as the months pass by. The next project comes up.
So that's something we can follow up with, maybe with that particular individual then, and afterwards. I know compatibility, application compatibility is, one of the big issues. What's the key challenge that companies are facing in terms of application compatibility?
Well, there can be a variety. I would say the first one would be often there's a lack of knowledge. They're not sure about the compatibility state of their application portfolio, including web apps and tech clients. So there's a fear, and this often leads to companies pushing back and a reluctance to actually migrate onto a new workstation. So the first challenge, I'd say, is an absence of knowledge or an intelligence about their application portfolio. The next challenge can be budgetary. A lot of application compatibility issues can be resolved if a checkbook is taken out and software upgrades are paid for. That can be a challenge. Final challenge may be that there is no upgrade or there's no actual known fix. This can happen a lot with bespoke software, where applications have been developed in-house. Developers have a habit of not abiding by recommended best practices in their development efforts. Major software commercial vendors do tend to abide by best practices. And what you find yourself is having to implement tweaks or perhaps some sort of a virtual desktop infrastructure to send a legacy environment for individual users who require individual legacy apps.
Okay, another question here for you, Liam. Hi, Liam. If you've done an application assessment and chose AppV as a delivery mechanism, how have you dealt with individual application licensing, re-virtualizing the application against locally installed? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's a good question. Okay. From Microsoft's perspective, and other software vendors, to be honest, they don't particularly care whether you have virtualized it and are deploying it through AppV. What they care about is whether you've paid for enough licenses for the number of seats and number of users within your environment that are using that application. Now, where the concern arises is if an application is streamed to a workstation and it exists within the application cache, and that user is no longer on that computer, but the binaries are still there. Those binaries will be removed from the cache after a certain threshold or duration in time. So I wouldn't be concerned. It does tend to come up with AppV. People see it as something that makes them non-compliant. It really doesn't. Software vendors won't be chasing after you because you virtualize your apps and you're delivering them to users through AppV. AppV is really a delivery mechanism for applications, and they run from the cache as opposed to being traditionally installed.
Okay, another question for you, Liam. Do you recommend 32-bit or 64-bit or a mixture, and why?
I would recommend you standardize. I myself won't go down the road of having both 64-bit and 32-bit. I think a standardized environment is a supportable environment, and that's a guiding principle anyone who's in IT decision making should be looking to abide by. I personally use 64-bit. I have no issue with 32-bit. I think for me it would really depend on your existing hardware fleet. If you've been buying 32-bit hardware over the last 2 or 3 years, stick with 32-bit. If you've been purchasing 64-bit hardware but perhaps deploying 32-bit XP, now you have the option of migrating to 64-bit. If your hardware fleet supports it, I would be inclined to encourage it. Any potential application compat issues, they've pretty much been ironed out at this phase. You also need to pay attention to whether you have any legacy 16-bit applications. You cannot run those 16-bit applications on a 16-bit on a 64-bit operating system.
Okay, I think we'll call it a day. We'll wrap up the session this morning, folks. I would just like to make the point, if you are having problems with your desktop migration strategy, don't suffer in silence. Give us a call. We're more than happy to help out. We're more than happy also to schedule some one-to-ones with Liam, and he can share his experience and maybe give you some hints and tips and pointers on how to go about the job of migrating away from Windows XP. We will be sending out a link with a recording of today's webinar, so as I say, if you want to share that amongst colleagues, please feel free to do so. And finally, on behalf of all the team here at MJ Flood Technology, I'd like to thank you for your time this morning, and we hope to welcome you to another webinar very soon. Thanks a lot, folks.